we identified 7 factors that correlate highly with stalled growth. And that began the journey because we diagnosed and addressed and actually fixed our own situation. We couldn't help but start using that information in our client consultations. I began speaking on the topic here and there, and then people began saying, "Where's the book?" And it took me 5 years to write it.
This is another episode of the Automate and Grow podcast, and my guest today is Steve McKee from McKee Wallwork Co. They are a marketing and advisory firm, and Steve is also the author of a couple books, including When Growth Stalls and Power Branding. Thanks for joining me today, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So one of the things I like to kind of start with is, how did you guys start and what do you guys do?
Well, yeah, it's all wrapped up in the same thing. So we started 22 years ago. We were an advertising agency, what you might expect, and had some really significant early success and then crashed, came very close to bankruptcy. And that's what started us on our real journey, which began 16 years ago and led to the book When Growth Stalls. So we made the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in the world. And promptly, our growth stopped after that, inexplicably. We didn't know why. There's a whole story behind it. That was the beginning of 2 years of drift, 94% turnover. Think about that.
Okay.
Not knowing what else to do, since we were on the Inc. 500 list, whether we belong there or not, we decided to commission a research study of Inc. 500 companies. And that we stumbled our way into our niche. We were looking for the secrets to success. We discovered the secrets to failure. The research screamed at us what we were doing wrong. One thing led to another, and now we are the nation's foremost experts on turning around what we call stalled, stuck, and stale organizations.
It's really interesting. So first of all, I mean, your focus was upon researching your fellow Inc. kind of 500 or 5,000 companies?
Inc. 500, yeah. That was before the Inc. 5,000.
Okay, so then it was
really meant something to make the list, yeah.
Yeah, well, it still does. I think there's just a lot more companies are submitting, maybe.
Right.
I don't know if my initial thought process after going through so much trauma would have been to commission a study. So tell me about that.
Well, great. That's a great question, great point. Because as I said, it was a 2-year period. So we were riding high. We made the list. We stalled right after we were notified. So I had to go to the conference in Palm Springs where everybody gets faded, right? And it was celebratory, feeling like a total failure, which was not fun. And we drifted for a long period of time. And you can do that for a little bit, but when people start quitting and you don't replace them, other people notice. So it wasn't a rapid fire thing. It was just, we didn't know what else to do. And we do a lot of market research for our clients, of course. And so we thought, well, we are a member of this list. We didn't feel like we deserved to be at that point, but it's a pretty exclusive club. We do know how to do research, so maybe we could learn something. So it was really quite a journey. We went to one of the research firms that we use a lot, kind of begged, borrowed, and stole to get them to give us the best price they could because we were hemorrhaging money, and didn't know what we were going to find, but we believe in the power of research. And when I was looking at the data, at the results, I do a lot of research for a living, of course, given what we do, and I'm usually the objective outsider looking for patterns, But in this case, going through these big data files, it felt like I was looking into a mirror because it was describing what was going on in my own company. So what we found was that of those companies that made the Inc. 500 list, and the list had been around for 20 years at that time, so there were several thousand companies that had made it. About 40% kept growing at a very rapid clip. About 40% kept growing but slowed down, and the remaining 18 to 20% went backwards, like us. And so that caught my eye. It really intrigued me because, one, I was, as much credit as I took for our success on the way up, I took all of the blame for our success on the way down. And what it said to me was, maybe I'm not an idiot. Maybe that this is
because that's your immediate reaction, right? You're like,
yeah, what's wrong with me?
Set it on fire.
So we went deep into those 18%, and we identified 7 factors that correlate highly with stalled growth. And that began the journey because we diagnosed and addressed and actually fixed our own situation.
Interesting.
We couldn't help but start using that information in our client consultations. I began speaking on the topic here and there, and then people began saying, "Where's the book?" And it took me 5 years to write the book.
Oh, wow.
But When Growth Stalls came out in 2009, which was a good timing given the economy.
Right.
And since that time, we've had this blue ocean to ourselves where people ask me, what do you specialize in? And my answer is, it's not what, it's when. One of the things we found was that it's when growth stalls. Yeah. One of the things we
Oh,
found was that over the course of an average decade, 50% of all companies go backwards for at least a year. That's a big number. And I don't think we really realize that, because when we read the business press, it's usually talking about the successes, right? It's not talking about the
or the
companies that
crash
crash
and
and
burn
burn.
failures, right?
Yeah, or the total crash and burn, right?
You don't see
Not
anything
the companies that are
between,
struggling.
and there's no analysis of it. So the
Right.
7 factors, like, do you want to share what those are, or we give them?
Sure, I'll give you a real brief overview, and then if
Yeah.
you want to dive deeper. So 3 of them are external. We call them market tectonics because, like plate tectonics in the geological world, when the earth shakes, it shakes everybody. And so everybody has to deal with them. But just to get them out of the way, the economy is the number one factor, of course. When there's a recession, everybody suffers. When growth is good, everybody does well. The second market tectonic is what we call changing dynamics. And that can be anything like a new technology that's introduced into your industry, or a government regulation that messes you up, or a cultural change that knocks you off your game. Um, Struggles, but it tends to affect every company in your industry, and so we all have to deal with it. And the third one is, of course, competition. It's incessant; it never ceases, and every company has to deal with the economy, changing dynamics, and competition, and that's sort of the art of corporate strategy. It's the 4 internal dynamics that lit me up, because we were suffering from all 4. And since that time, I'll tell you, well, every company has all 4 within at all times, but I'll tell you why it harms some and doesn't harm others. But the 4 internal dynamics are: first, foremost, and worst, a lack of alignment among the management team. We find this in our consulting engagements the most common issue, and we also find it the most destructive issue for a couple of reasons. First, if you're not aligned, it doesn't matter what your strategy is, because it won't get executed. Second, many companies don't recognize a lack of alignment, and sometimes intentionally, because it can be difficult to deal with. So if you think about, sometimes there's aggressive aggression and you can deal with it, but most of the time it's passive. So people being late to meetings, the subtle rolling of the eyes, the hallway conversation, where people are being, subversive, and they're not meaning to be. It's just our human nature. We find that this is the most common problem that companies face.
So just so I understand, when you say lack of alignment, they're fighting each other as opposed to working together to accomplish a business goal?
Correct. And what happens is, when you're hit with a tectonic event like a recession or something that impacts the company, it's easy to overlook differences when everybody's making their bonus. But when you start worrying about your mortgage payment, you start questioning your colleagues. And so we can come back to that, but I'll just get through the 4. So lack of alignment. The second is a loss of focus. And this happens typically in one of 2 ways. Either you're doing well and you get cocky, and so you start extending your brand or your business into lines that you probably shouldn't. You can stretch a brand so far that it rips, we like to say. Or the other way a loss of focus happens is you get hit with a tectonic event, and so you start chasing business you shouldn't be chasing, lowering your prices or what have you. That's very destructive. The third is a loss of nerve, and you can tell these things sort of feed upon one another. You get scared, and most of the time it manifests itself in how organizations spend their money and how much they spend, especially on things like marketing, training, R&D, things that you can cut immediately and the money will drop to the bottom line and you don't feel any real pain immediately,
But
but
long
the pain
term.
is coming. But loss of nerve also manifests itself in fear of having what we call sharp elbows in the marketplace, really being bold as you go out there with your positioning, kind of wanting to stand under the same tree your competitors are standing under, and that doesn't do you any good. And the fourth factor is inconsistency, where struggling companies tend to lurch from one idea to another looking for that silver bullet solution. And so my firm was suffering from all 4. It's really incredible. And what's so sinister about it is the 4 factors tend to feed on one another and create a vicious cycle. So if you're suffering from a lack of alignment, you are very easily going to drift into a loss of focus because the management team isn't aligned.
Right.
So you start to drift. And the more you start to drift, you get scared and you start to get conservative in how you manage your messaging and your money. And the more you do that, you're just casting about looking for silver bullet solutions. And that feeds the lack of alignment, and it becomes this vicious cycle. And I'll tell you, Michael, what's so remarkable, you can look at the demise of any famous company, certainly over the past 15 years when we've been studying it, and you can pinpoint 4 factors, whether that's Yahoo, whether that's Toys R Us, whether that's Radio Shack. Sears is going through it right now.
Sears is bizarre.
And they never did. You can diagnose it according to the 4 factors. In fact, when Yahoo was circling the drain, the Wall Street Journal wrote a 400-word article about it. 400 words. All 4 factors were in those 400 words. Now, they didn't describe it the way I would, but it's a common pattern. And that's why I say we failed our way to success, because we see these dynamics arise in every company that we consult when growth stalls. And what makes us unique as a firm is we don't just address the external strategic questions, which a lot of good consultants can do, but we go face first into the internal dynamics and challenge the companies to confront them. And only by fixing both can you really pick yourself up off the pavement. And that's a real unique focus we have. We lived it, and then we started doing it, and then we started publishing about it, and here we are.
So each of these, I mean, obviously the 3 external factors, not so much in your control, it's more about how you respond to them.
Right.
But the other 4, and it totally makes sense what you're saying, which is, lack of management alignment, loss of focus, and that can be product or business focus, right? Or opportunity focus. Oh my goodness.
Loss of nerve. Yeah.
Nerve, yeah, that's what I wrote. Nerve, and then inconsistency, right? Which is, you get scared and you're pulling out money from things that are going to help you continue to thrive, right? Like R&D, marketing, and then training, developing your people. Yeah. So it's interesting. Those 4, though, how do you diagnose those? And, I can immediately see how those are more strategic, right? They're a leadership issue.
Yeah. Yes, they are. How we diagnose them is this is what's so fascinating. We did our original survey in 2003 and started consulting on it. Then when I wrote the book, we did a second wave in 2008. The first survey was only among Inc. 500 companies. The second was a cross-section of American companies, and that deepened and broadened our findings. And we've been doing research ever since. And what we've been able to do is identify the leading questions to ask that correlate with those issues. And the initial step of our engagement is to profile companies based on those questions. In fact, on our website, there is a self-diagnosis. You can go on there and answer 20 questions, and up will pop a little thermometer that suggests how your company might be doing. Now, it's not scientific. Our studies are scientific. This is anecdotal, but it's pretty accurate. And so the first step you have to take in dealing with any problems is admitting there's a problem, right? So companies have to confront what's really going on. And I have to tell you, I've been in many boardrooms presenting my shtick for the first time, and they say to me, "Have you been spying on us? How do you know?" And we say we know because it happens everywhere. And so I mentioned that it's present within all companies all the time. Here's the best analogy I've come up with over the years. It's like health. You could define health, personal health, as the successful battle against things that are trying to kill you, right? Because at any given time, there's bacteria in our bodies and it's trying to kill us. And when we have a healthy immune system, our immune system is tamping down the bacteria, and health is sort of a stasis there. When you're hit with a blizzard or a flu or a death in the family or some stressful event, your immune system gets depressed, the bacteria start to take over, and if left untreated, you could die. This is what happens inside companies. There's always never perfect alignment, right? There's always fear, there's always those. But when you're doing well, your corporate immune system is keeping it tamped down. But when something happens, something external to the company, it allows those dynamics to arise, and left untreated, they will kill you. And they killed Yahoo, and they are killing Sears, and they killed Radio Shack, and they killed Circuit City, and you can go on down the list. It's a fascinating study.
So it's interesting because some of those examples in my head, loss of focus, where you can see though there's a shift in the market, and sometimes you're focused on something that's dying, right? So like use a Radio Shack as an example. So there's probably one where it's kind of curious, like, okay, my thing is dead. My demand curve is declining. I'm battling it out. If I stay focused on that demand curve, and that's what my brand is about, how do I solve that?
Right.
Isn't that
no
why
one ever
people start looking for other opportunities? Like,
yes, and no one ever said this stuff is easy, right? It's easy to Monday morning quarterback it, but nobody ever said
Right.
it's easy. Radio Shack did have to look, but let me present to you a couple of examples. So there's one that's caught kind of on the downside now, Forever 21, the young women's clothing brand. One of the senior executives at Forever 21 was quoted as saying, "We have to overcome the stigma of our name." And what that reflected was, here's a company, a retailer that appeals to young girls as they're growing up who want to be 21, Forever 21. And they do really, really well for a period of time. Well, guess what? Their customer base turns 21, and then it turns 25, and then it turns 28, and it becomes professional, and it starts having babies and all those things that changes its taste. What does Forever 21 do? So the decision they were confronted with was, do we keep abandoning our customers to go for the younger generation, or do we stay with our customer cohort as they age and overcome the stigma of our name? Not an easy question. The decision they made was to do both, which was the wrong decision. So I'm not saying that it was easy, but then let me give you an alternate example. In its 40-year history, Apple has had to find its focus twice. They just refocused on Apple News and Apple Music and all this because they were in a commoditized category of smartphones. It happened once before with the desktop PCs. And whether or not Apple succeeds with this new strategy, time will tell. However, I give the company credit for recognizing that they need to change their focus, evolve their focus. And that's really the art of corporate strategy. Right. It's not easy. If it was easy, anybody could do it. But it's when it's a loss of focus from neglect, because you just think your market's going to go on forever, or from arrogance, those are self-inflicted wounds.
So it's interesting because I'll go back to the Forever 21 example, where my assessment of, I mean, maybe they have more information than I do, but I think they have a great brand, but I think they're in a category that's like, you know, you're dealing with dynamics that have changed, right?
Fashion, right.
Well, it's fast fashion. If you go in there, I look at their stuff and I'm like, this looks really good, and it's too cheap, which is probably part of their problem. And they're probably super invested in real estate. So it's interesting that their assessment is, no, we're not appealing to our customer anymore, because I just think that's a forever refreshing customer.
Well, it is forever refreshing, but Gap, which is having its issues, has really transcended those trends for a long period of time. And Gap was a strong retail brand for a very long time. Anthropologie is another example of a brand that has stood for some time. It's a difficult industry because you're dealing with fashion. I think in Forever 21's case, it was specifically related to the fact that even the name of the company, unlike Gap, was anchored in an age cohort. And that's what threw them off. Now, when they started the firm, they could have never
Forever 21 isn't kids, though. Like Forever 21 would be someone that's 30 or 40 that's like, hey, I'm Forever 20.
Well, but see, they had to make merchandising decisions as well. And so the kind of clothes they stocked, the styles, the sizes, you know, 16-year-old girls don't want to shop in mom's store. Right. And moms don't want to shop in teenager's store. So it's a tough category. You know, another example, great example. This is just Under Armour is having its issues. Right. Under Armour carved out. They did a magnificent job going to market against one of the toughest competitors in the world, Nike. And they carved out a niche underneath Nike that was brilliant. Here's what happened. Under Armour lost its focus. You know how? They did, I published on this when this came out. They inked a distribution deal with Kohl's. Oh. Now, Under Armour's customer is the tough high school urban athlete. Right. Who shops at Kohl's? Their mothers. Right. So it was a case of Under Armour getting cocky, seeing dollar signs because the distribution went, you know, it was amazing. And they ended up kicking off their channel partners, specifically sporting goods stores, and turning off their core customers. And that was a case of a loss of focus that was completely, they stepped in it, all on their own.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like that whole fashion and apparel business is, you know, challenging. And it's especially challenging when you're in a structure that A, is declining, real estate, and B, you're not adapting to, which is e-commerce probably, and someone else is. And the two that are more recent that are interesting that, you know, I think your methodology pans out with is like Barneys, which is bizarre, right? But and then the other one, which is really interesting that we were just talking about is, this is really interesting. So recently, I don't know if you know who Ty Lopez is and Alex Mayer. No. They're really big with a younger crowd around social media marketing, helping people start agencies. but they made an announcement that they acquired a digital brand for a long-term brand, which is Dress Barn. And this is a company that, they're just basically what they acquired was the domain, I believe. And I don't know the details of the deal, but by taking the domain, they're taking what I think is the most valuable asset, which is the e-commerce portion of a brand that probably has a market. And I can see a trend where, I would like to have the Barneys domain.
Sure.
I mean,
Oh,
that
yeah.
would,
Well, I'd like to have the Radio Shack domain.
Yeah, right? Because there's still a market for it if you pay attention to the change in dynamic.
So here is a principle that we share with our clients, and at first they don't really get it, but let me share it with you. Your business does not have a brand. Your brand has a business. Business models die because they're material and they wear out. Brands are ideas and brands are eternal. So what most companies do is they hold on tightly to their business model and they manage their brand loosely. When in fact, what they should do is hold on tightly to their brand and hold their business model loosely. So the Barneys brand, the Radio Shack brand, the Yahoo brand, you name it, the Sears brand. Oh, would I love to have the Sears brand.
Right.
But they hold on so tight to their business model until they decline. And so it's a misunderstanding of it's the tail wagging the dog, not rather than the other way around. And one of the reasons is because of these 4 destructive internal dynamics.
Totally.
You start messing with people's business model and they freak out. That's the art of corporate leadership.
So the other one that you touch on, which is Sears, is really interesting to me because wasn't Sears originally Amazon? If you go back 100 years or 75 years, the power of Sears that killed all the retailers was they were Amazon.
Sears was Amazon, and oddly enough, Amazon came out with a Christmas toy catalog this year, which is just like they're building stores, right? Sears was Amazon, but so here's
and when I say Sears, so people that are listening, Sears's original business model was direct to consumer.
It was direct mail delivery through a catalog, which was the internet of the day.
Which is now internet, but in those days it was like you get the Sears catalog, you pick your item, you fill it out, your stuff shows up, you either pick it up or it's delivered to you, right?
You can buy a house on Sears.
Which blows my mind about Sears because they were that model that killed everybody. And then it's like they became what they killed.
Well, what they did was they successfully navigated the transition from direct mail to retail, and they dominated that for so long. Then they got their eyes on Walmart, so the competition, and they saw Walmart as their, it really was their competition. Walmart became the biggest retailer in the world, and they didn't really see this e-commerce thing coming. Borders famously outsourced its website to Amazon. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
So nobody really saw it coming. And it's easy, again, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback that thing. But Sears' problem is really very simple. It's number one, the lack of alignment. The company has not been able to keep anybody in the C-suite because of the chairman, Lampert, who considers it a real estate play rather than a retail play. So he never had a chance to see Amazon come here to retool it. It's still not too late. It's still not too late. If Sears held tightly to its brand and let go of its business model, it could make a run. It's not gonna.
But first of all, I would say that before Eddie Lampert came along, that was a dying brand. So they had lots of runway to figure it out. And to your point, he's not interested in figuring it out. He's a vulture capitalist, and he took, he did a leverage buyout using Kmart. So he's got 2 brands that probably have value in the future for whoever picks it up off the scrap pile. And he just keeps making money on the way down.
He does, and I don't know why anybody would loan Sears money. I just don't.
It's like he's got a model there where it's like poison debt. So there's a guy that's not interested in those brands. But you're right, like both of those brands are enduring, right? Like even Kmart, believe it or not, do you know Kmart's those stores?
Yes.
Like so weird. Like you would ask someone, like, no, they're out of business, but they have stores.
They have stores.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very valuable. I'll take any one of them as a brand.
I agree. Like it's really interesting because it just kind of validates your point, which is that businesses have brands, right?
Brands have businesses.
Brands have businesses. Sorry, I got it backwards.
Right.
Brands have businesses. Let's not confuse anybody. Where that business is going to die, but the brand is like enduring. Like you could reuse Kmart, you could reuse Sears, and you would have tremendous businesses.
Well, and even there are companies that buy old dead brands, TWA, and there's a market for non-extant brands like Dress Barn.
Well, that's one I look at and go, what? But it makes sense. Those guys know something.
They know something, and maybe it's just they believe in the strength of the brand and they know how they can monetize it.
They're
They think
those
they know.
two guys, absolutely. Like they are 100% e-commerce, Facebook ad geniuses, and they understand content. And they're gonna be, I guarantee, I would be shocked if they're not completely virtual in the merchandise, and they're just like making money on the brand, and they'll probably kill it
Sure,
because,
sure,
yeah.
sure.
Well, Steve, I don't want to make sure that I'm conscious of your time. I'm gonna ask you two questions, and then we can wrap up. First off, I guess before that, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to share with us?
Just the current evolution of our consulting. We're getting much more into business model consulting, and it's based on this idea of your brand has a business, not your business has a brand. So as the what we call the disruption cycle turns ever faster with technology, companies are facing the issue of commoditization, obsolescence more quickly than ever. And so the premium on being willing to change, the former CEO, Paul Raines of GameStop said, your internal rate of change has to be greater than the external rate of change. It really takes some emotional intelligence to navigate this world of business. And so I would encourage anybody who's listening to really hold loosely to their business model and always be considering what the next round of disruption is going to be.
And rest in peace to Paul Raines. Unfortunately, he passed recently, right?
Yeah.
But he was a great leader, and they were successful for a long time. And it's a
They
tough.
navigated the recession very well. Yeah.
But they did. There's another one that had have had a tough time to navigate. So, and let's just
we
clarify.
all do sooner or later.
Right. Yeah. There's like that. There's changes in dynamics, right? And you have to adjust. I love your model. It makes total sense. And you're not limited to working in retail. We've talked a lot about retail because that's obviously a tough sector, but
no, we work. That's why I say we don't specialize in any vertical. It's not what, it's a when. Every company in every industry runs into rough waters. And one of the things that makes our work better is we believe in the cross-pollination of working in a variety of industries. Because it's remarkable how every company in every industry is different, but they're also the same. And it's remarkable how one business model or lesson learned or application in an industry can translate into a completely different industry. Really remarkable.
So the typical customer that you're going to help is any brand that is believed it's struggling because they've stalled and they need basically outside perspective to address.
They don't know what to do. It's not about hiring a new ad agency. That's what their first reaction is always to do. That doesn't work.
Interesting.
It's when we like the tough cases when they don't know what exactly to do because they're looking at the external dynamics and they think they've got those handled. And what we say to them is it's not about that. It's about what's going on inside the company. Your mother was right. It's what's inside that counts.
Well, somebody's mom is running everything these days, so it must work out.
Yes. Moms are wonderful.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to wrap with two questions, Steve. The first one is, how are you, Steve, or your group changing the world?
We are really excited about what we do. Our corporate vision is to be a blessing to the world, which I know is a bit of an unusual word. But the way we do that is when you take a company that's struggling or in decline, and all of the not only economic angst that causes, but social and behavioral and even familial angst in the people's lives, and you can help them turn it around. It's much more than about commerce. Commerce is important, creating jobs, but it's much more than about commerce. As I said, when you're worried you're not going to make your mortgage payment, that's affecting your life in a lot of different ways. If we can help you get past that, we're going to be a blessing to you and your family and the world. And so that's how we look at it.
That's amazing. Well, I appreciate your time today. When we have interesting guests, we ask you to also nominate other interesting guests. And usually we talk to experts or entrepreneurs on their journey and how they're affecting the people that they serve. And so I'd like you, Steve, if you can nominate somebody that you think would be a great guest for Automate and Grow.
Right here, right now. Yes?
Oh, yeah, on the spot.
Denise Lee Yon. Do you know Denise?
No.
Denise Lee Yon. She's a branding expert based in the Bay Area. She's written a couple books, and she really understands the concept of the brand and the business being what we say inextricably intertwined, that culture is brand, brand is culture. She's brilliant. She's smart. She's fascinating. Tell her I said so, and she owes me one when you book her.
All right. We will accept that nomination. So Denise Leon, you've been nominated by Steve to be a featured guest on the Automate and Grow podcast. Steve, I want to thank you. Your insights are very, very valuable and interesting, and I look forward to staying in touch with you in the future.
Thanks. Thanks for the time.
No problem.